She gave a hungry child her only meal. She had no idea that one sandwich would pull her into the most powerful family in Korea, and there was no going back. It was March 15th, a warm spring afternoon in Atlanta. Inside St. Mary's Hospital, Tiana Brooks had been on her feet for 12 straight hours. Her scrubs smelled like antiseptic. Her stomach had been growling since morning. But she kept pushing, because that's what Tiana did. She showed up for people, even when no one showed up for her. Her mother, Lorraine, had one rule she repeated like scripture. You never know who you're helping, baby, but the world has a way of giving back what you give. Tiana lived by those words, but that afternoon tested everything she believed. She reached the break room, a homemade turkey sandwich and fruit salad, just enough to survive the rest of her shift. She pushed open the door and froze. A small boy stood alone by the vending machine, no older than 8, black hair tangled, clothes torn at the sleeves, dirt smeared across his cheek, sneakers too big, laces untied. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, wide, dark brown, filled with the kind of fear that doesn't come from being lost. It comes from being left. He clutched a stuffed bear so tight his knuckles turned white. No crying, no sound, just staring at the floor like he was trying to disappear. Tiana crouched down. "Hey there, little one. Are you okay?" The boy flinched, a tiny pull backward, like he wasn't used to gentle voices. "Where's your family?" Nothing. He didn't speak, just stared with heavy eyes that carried too much for his age. She noticed his cracked lips, his thin arms, fingernails bitten to the skin. This child hadn't eaten in a while. She tore her sandwich in half and held it out. "Want to share with me?" His bottom lip trembled. He reached out slowly, wrapped small fingers around the bread, and ate. Not fast, not desperate. Carefully, like someone had taught him not to eat too quickly or it would be taken away. They sat on the floor and shared everything she had. When he finished, the boy folded the leftover crust neatly on a napkin and pushed it back toward her, like he didn't want to take too much, like he'd been trained to never accept more than he was given. Tiana walked him to security. No missing child reports, no frantic parent, no identification, nothing except the bear and the dirt on his face. She stayed 2 hours past her shift, talked softly about nothing important, the weather, the birds outside. The boy didn't respond, but slowly his head rested against her arm. Trust, not spoken, just given. When social services arrived, 2 officers in plain clothes came with them. Quiet, professional. Something about the way they looked at the boy told Tiana this wasn't routine. They knew something she didn't. As they guided him toward the door, the boy stopped, turned, and spoke for the first time. "Thank you, nurse lady." 4 words, barely a whisper. They hit like a freight train. Now, let me ask you something. 47 people walked past that boy. Nurses, doctors, staff. Not one of them stopped. Not one of them sat on the floor and shared their meal with a scared child. Only Tiana did. And what happened next, because of that one act of kindness, most people will never believe it. But if you're the kind of person who would have stopped too, subscribe right now, because this story is about to take a turn that will stay with you for days. And if you're not subscribed, you're going to miss it. She watched him disappear through the double doors, clutching that bear like it was the only safe thing left in his world. She drove home in silence. No radio, just his voice in her head. She didn't sleep. She lay awake replaying every detail, the torn clothes, the bitten nails, the way he folded that crust and pushed it back, the way those officers looked at him, not with pity, but with recognition. Who was that boy? By morning, the answers would come looking for her, and they wouldn't come gently. The next morning, her phone buzzed in the locker room. Unknown number. She picked up. "Miss Brooks?" Deep, cold, the kind of voice that doesn't ask, it commands. We need to speak. Who is this? Outside the back entrance of your hospital, 15 minutes. Come alone. Do not call anyone. The line went dead. Every instinct told her to walk the other way, but something pulled at her. The boy's face, those heavy eyes, the way those officers looked at him like they already knew his name. 15 minutes later, Tiana pushed open the back door of St. Mary's. 3 black SUVs sat in the parking lot. Not hospital vehicles, not police. Armored, tinted windows so dark you couldn't see a shadow inside. Engines running low and steady, like predators waiting. 6 men stood outside, all in dark suits, all with earpieces, all watching her like they'd been expecting her at exactly this second. One stepped forward, tall, sharp-featured, Korean, mid-40s. His posture was military straight, and his eyes scanned Tiana the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, missing nothing. "You're the nurse from yesterday," he said, not a question. Tiana held her ground. "You have about 30 seconds to explain before I walk back inside and call security." The man didn't flinch. "My name is Director Kang. The boy you helped yesterday, his name is Jin-Soo Park." The name meant nothing to her. Jin-Soo is the only son of Dong-Hyun Park, a man whose name controls entire industries across East Asia: shipping, real estate, technology, finance. If it moves through Korea, his family owns a piece of it. The parking lot felt smaller. The air felt thinner. That boy was placed inside your hospital deliberately, alone, frightened, dirty, on purpose. Tiana's stomach turned. "You're telling me someone put a child through that intentionally?" "It was a test, Miss Brooks." Silence, the kind that presses against your chest. 47 staff members passed that boy yesterday. 3 nurses noticed him and called security from a distance. 1 doctor told him to sit down and stop crying. Not 1 person touched him. Not 1 fed him a meal. Not 1 sat beside a scared child and treated him like he mattered. Kang's eyes locked onto hers. You passed. 47 failed. Before Tiana could respond, the rear door of the middle SUV opened. The boy stepped out. He wasn't the same boy. Hair combed, white shirt pressed, polished shoes. A completely different child, except for one thing. He was still holding that stuffed bear. The moment he saw Tiana, he ran, his small arms wrapped around her legs and pressed his face into her scrubs. "I told them it was you," he whispered. Tiana's hand trembled as she placed it on his head. Her throat burned. This boy, this quiet, scared boy she'd shared her sandwich with, had been watching her, testing whether her kindness was real. Kang let the moment settle, then his voice shifted. Not warmth, but weight. The Park family wants you to become Jin-Soo's personal caretaker, in Seoul, starting immediately. The salary is more than you've earned in 5 years combined. He paused. You have 48 hours to decide. Tiana looked down at Jin-Soo. He looked up at her, the same dark brown eyes from yesterday. But now they weren't filled with fear. They were filled with hope. And that scared Tiana more than anything Kang had said. Because hope meant this boy was counting on her. Hope meant if she said no, she'd be one more person who walked away. Kang turned toward the SUV. 48 hours. After that, the offer disappears. The convoy pulled away, slow, silent, like it had never been there. Tiana stood alone in the parking lot, Georgia's son on her face, an impossible decision on her shoulders. She had fed a lost child half a sandwich, and now the most powerful family in Korea wanted her life. Tiana told only one person, her mother. She sat at Lorraine's kitchen table that evening and laid out everything: the boy, the convoy, the test, Seoul, the offer. Lorraine listened without interrupting. When Tiana finished, the kitchen went quiet, just the clock ticking on the wall like a second heartbeat. Then Lorraine spoke, one sentence, and it cut deeper than anything Kong had said. "Baby, they're not buying your skills, they're buying your heart. And once someone owns your heart, they own your decisions." She was right. A family powerful enough to control industries across a continent didn't need a nurse from Atlanta. They could hire anyone on Earth. So why her? Tiana spent the next 36 hours in agony. She picked up the phone 3 times to call Kong and decline. 3 times she put it down, because every time her finger hovered over that keypad, she saw the boy. Not the test version, the real one. The one who flinched at a gentle voice. The one whose fingernails were bitten to the skin. The one who folded a bread crust and pushed it back because he'd been trained to never take more than he was given. That boy was going back to a world that treated him like property, and she was the only person he trusted. On the second night, Tiana called Kong. Her voice was steady, her words were sharp. "I'll come, but no one tells me how to care for that child. No one tells me how to love him. If that's a problem, find someone else." Silence. Then Kong said, "That is exactly the answer the family expected." Now think about what Tiana is doing here. She's leaving behind everything. Her mother, her job, her city, her safety. Flying 14 hours into a world run by a family that tests people using frightened children. And she's doing it because she refuses to let a little boy believe kindness doesn't exist. If that kind of courage doesn't move you, nothing will. But if it does, if something in this story is pulling at you, subscribe now, because what she walks into next, no one warned her about. She packed one suitcase. At the airport, Lorraine stood at the gate. She didn't cry. Lorraine Brooks never cried in public, but her chin trembled once. That was enough. She leaned close and whispered, "Remember who you are." On the plane, Tiana opened a sealed envelope from Kong. A cream-colored card, one sentence in black ink. "Loyalty is the only currency that never loses value. D. Park." She read it 3 times. Each time it felt less like a welcome and more like a warning. The plane touched down in Seoul. Through the window, a motorcade waited on the tarmac. Not at the terminal, on the runway itself. Tiana gripped the armrest. She understood something clearly now. She was no longer in a world that followed normal rules. The motorcade didn't take her to a house. It took her to a fortress. The Park estate sat behind stone walls on the outskirts of Seoul, cameras, armed guards at every gate, gardens stretching in every direction. Staff moved in silence. Maids walked with their heads bowed. Tiana noticed something the moment she stepped out. No one smiled. Not the driver, not the woman who took her bag, not the guard at the entrance. Everyone moved with precision, but their faces all carried the same expression: obedience wearing a mask of calm. Kong led her through hallways lined with portraits of Park patriarchs, hard faces, cold eyes. Not one looked like a man who knew how to love a child. Jin-Soo's wing occupied the entire 3rd floor. Kong opened the double doors, and Tiana stepped into a space that should have felt like a palace. It felt like a prison. A massive bedroom, shelves of books in 3 languages, a desk stacked with workbooks and a printed schedule, every hour planned from 6 in the morning to 9 at night. Mandarin, mathematics, etiquette. But no drawings on the walls, no toys on the carpet, no crayons, no mess. Everything perfectly placed, perfectly lifeless. This wasn't a child's room. It was a display case. Jin-Soo sat cross-legged on the floor, lining up toy soldiers in a perfect row, each one spaced the same distance apart. When he saw Tiana, his whole body changed. He ran to her and grabbed her hand like she was the only solid thing in a room made of glass. He spent the day showing her his world, the garden he couldn't play in without permission, the kitchen where he ate alone at a table meant for 12, the library where tutors taught him languages, but never asked what he was feeling. "Do you like it here?" Tiana asked. Jinsu looked at the floor. "I like it when someone talks to me." That answer split his chest open. That evening, one woman stood apart from the staff, Mrs. Cho, head housekeeper, 22 years with the Parks, sharp eyes behind thin glasses. After dinner, she appeared at Tiana's door. Didn't step inside, just stood in the hallway and spoke barely over a whisper. "Love the boy. That is your job, but do not try to understand the father." She paused. "Understanding him is dangerous." "Why?" Mrs. Cho walked away without answering. Her footsteps faded like a warning dissolving into silence. Late that night, voices raised, echoing from deep inside the estate. She followed the sound down a staircase, through a dim hallway, past a door left slightly open. Kong's voice, rapid, tense, speaking Korean, then a second voice, deeper, colder. The voice of a man who had never been questioned in his life. It switched to English, deliberate, as if he knew someone was listening. "The boy is an asset. Treat him accordingly." Tiana stopped breathing. 6 words, and every illusion about why she was brought here cracked down the middle. She pressed her back against the wall, heart pounding, fists clenched. Now she understood what Mrs. Cho meant, and now she faced a choice far heavier than the decision to come to Seoul. Stay quiet, follow orders, collect the paycheck, or protect that boy from the very family that owned him. Tiana met Dong-hyun Park the next morning, and everything she thought she was prepared for vanished the moment he looked at her. His office sat on the top floor, dark wood, clean lines, windows overlooking Seoul. No warmth, just power arranged into furniture. He sat behind a wide desk, signing documents without looking up. Early 40s, sharp jaw, tailored black suit, hands that moved with the precision of a man who controlled billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. When he raised his eyes, Tiana felt the room go cold. They weren't angry. They weren't cruel. They were empty. Like someone had pulled the fuse on every human emotion and left nothing but calculation. Then she noticed it. A photograph on his desk. A Korean woman with a warm smile. A smile Tiana recognized. She'd seen it on Jin Soo's face the day he hugged her legs in that parking lot. His mother. Dong-hyun caught her looking. His hand moved fast, slid the photograph face down. When his eyes returned to hers, the emptiness had been replaced by something sharper. Rage, pressed under glass. He didn't welcome her, didn't thank her. He set terms. Jin Soo lacks discipline. He lacks focus. He lacks emotional control. Each word landed like a verdict. His mother made him soft. You will correct that. Heat climbed Tiana's neck. This man could end her contract with a single call. She spoke anyway. "He's 8 years old. Softness at 8 is called being a child." The room went still. Kong shifted his weight by the door. The air between Tiana and Dong-hyun became something solid. He stared at her, not with anger, with recognition, like her words triggered a memory he'd spent years burying. "You have 6 months," he said quietly. "Make him strong, or I will find someone who will." Tiana left shaking, not from fear, from fury. She went straight to Jinsoo's room and found him on the carpet, lining up toy soldiers. Same perfect rows, a child rehearsing control because the adults around him demanded nothing less. He looked up. "Did Appa scare you too?" Asked the way someone asks about the weather, casual, like being scared of his father was just another fact of life. Tiana knelt beside him. "Nobody is going to scare me away from you." Over the weeks that followed, she pieced things together. Jinsoo's mother, Yuna, died 2 years ago. No one would say how. Mrs. Cho shut down when the name came up. Staff avoided the East Wing where Yuna's belongings sat behind a sealed door. And Jinsu, in quiet moments, whispered to a stuffed bear. Not random words, full sentences, stories, secrets. He spoke to that bear the way a child speaks to the only person who ever made them feel safe. The bear wasn't a toy. It was his mother's last gift, the final piece of Yuna that hadn't been erased. One night, Jinsu crawled into Tiana's room. He stood by her bed in the dark, voice small and cracked. Appa says Eoma left because I wasn't strong enough. He paused. Is that true? Tiana pulled him close. That is never true. No mother leaves because her child is gentle. Gentle is the bravest thing a person can be. He buried his face in her shoulder and cried. Not silent, held back tears. Real crying, the kind that sounds like something breaking free. She held him until he fell asleep. In the stillness of that room, staring at the ceiling of a house that treated this boy like a chess piece, she made a decision that would put her against the most dangerous man she had ever met. She was going to find out what happened to Yuna. She waited until 2 in the morning, every light off, every hallway empty. Tiana moved through the dark corridors barefoot, counting doors until she reached the East Wing, the sealed section, the part of the house everyone avoided like it carried a curse. The door wasn't locked. A family this powerful, this obsessed with control, and the handle just turned. Maybe no one needed a lock. Maybe fear was enough. She stepped inside. The room was exactly as Yuna had left. Folded sheets, a dusty vanity mirror, dresses still hanging in order, perfume bottles lined by height, slippers beside the bed, still pointed toward the door as if their owner had just stepped out. 2 years. Nothing moved, nothing touched. It felt less like a room, more like a grave. Tiana opened the closet, ran her hands along the coats in the back. Her fingers caught on something, a stiffness in the lining of a wool jacket. She pulled the seam apart and found it. A journal. Small, leather-bound, hidden inside the fabric like a secret sewn into skin. She sat on the floor and opened it. The first entries were warm. Yuna wrote about her early years with Donghyun, an arranged marriage she entered with hope, a man who laughed with baby Jinsu at 3 in the morning, who held her hand during storms and whispered she was the only person who made him feel human. Then the entry shifted. Rival families challenged the empire. Donghyun retreated into the cold version Tiana now knew. Yuna described arguments becoming silence, silence becoming isolation. Her phone monitored, friendships severed, not through violence, through control, so quiet she didn't recognize the cage until the door was shut. The final entries were frantic. Yuna discovered something about the family's operations. She called it only the ledger. She didn't describe what it contained, but she wrote it was enough to destroy the empire. She planned to take Jinsu and leave. She reached out to someone outside the family for help. The last entry was one line. If you're reading this, it means he won. Please protect my son. Tiana closed the journal, hand shaking, the room pressing in around her. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was holding a dead woman's secret, and the man who may have silenced that woman signed her paychecks. A woman hid a journal inside the lining of her own coat because she knew that speaking the truth in that house would cost her everything. Her last words weren't written to a husband or a lawyer. They were written to a stranger she hoped would be brave enough to find them. If you've made it this far, you already know something terrible happened to Yuna, and if you leave now, you'll never find out what Tiana does with the truth. Subscribe, because this story is about to cross a line it can't come back from. The next morning, Tiana carried on as normal, fed Jinsu, walked him through lessons, smiled when staff looked her way. Inside, every nerve burned. That night, a knock at her door. Mrs. Cho, face pale, hands clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. You went into the East Wing. Not a question. I saw the camera footage. Tiana's stomach dropped. Who else saw? Something shifted behind Mrs. Cho's eyes, something old and tired that had been buried for years. No one. I erased it. Her voice cracked. I've been erasing things in this house for 22 years. Tears filled her eyes, the first real tears Tiana had seen from anyone in this household. Yuna was my friend, a whisper, and I did nothing to save her. She gripped Tiana's arm, fingers trembling. Don't make my mistake. She turned and walked away, footsteps disappearing down the corridor. Tiana stood in the doorway, clutching the journal, realizing two things at once. She was no longer alone in this house, and the cracks in the empire were already forming. 2 weeks later, the estate transformed, and not in a way that felt like celebration. Dong Hyun announced the Park family's first formal gala since Yuna's death. Every powerful family in Korea would attend. Crystal chandeliers, security at every entrance, a guest list that read like a registry of East Asia's wealthiest bloodlines. This wasn't a party, it was a performance, and Jin-soo was the centerpiece. The morning of the gala, Tiana dressed him in a tailored charcoal suit. She knelt to fix his collar and felt his hands trembling. I don't want to go down there, he whispered. I know, but I'll be right beside you. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, squeeze my hand twice. That's our signal. I'll get you out. He searched her eyes, measuring, deciding if this was a promise that would be kept. He nodded. Downstairs, the gala was a theater of power. Tiana had never seen wealth performed this aggressively, not as joy, but as dominance. Every handshake a transaction, every smile arithmetic. Men in suits worth more than her salary shook hands without warmth, scanning the room like traders on a stock floor. She stood behind Jin-soo as Dong Hyun paraded him from guest to guest. His son, his heir, his legacy. The people who leaned down to greet the boy looked at him the way investors study a portfolio, calculating value, not feeling affection. Jin-soo said nothing, bowed when told, shook hands when guided, a puppet in a suit. Then the night turned. A woman approached Tiana directly, elegant, mid-50s, Korean, eyes that read the room the way a general reads a battlefield. She introduced herself as Madame Seo, matriarch of a rival family. So you're the American nurse, she said in flawless English, the one who fed the boy. I am. Madame Seo leaned closer. Her voice carried no warmth. Yuna tried to send Jin-soo to me before she died. Did anyone tell you that? The floor tilted beneath Tiana's feet. She shook her head. Madame Seo pressed a folded note into Tiana's palm and walked away without another word. The second turn came an hour later. Dong Hyun took the stage. Hundreds of faces turned. He spoke about the park legacy, strength, tradition, the future, represented by Jin-soo, standing frozen beside his father under a white spotlight. Then he said it. My son carries the spirit of the park name. He is his father's son, nothing more, nothing less. Not a word about Yuna, not a mention, as if the woman who gave birth to the boy under that light had been deleted from history. Jin-soo squeezed Tiana's hand once, twice. She didn't hesitate, took his hand, turned from the stage, and walked him through the crowd, past the staring faces, past the whispers, past 200 of the most powerful people in Korea watching a Black American nurse defy the host of the year's biggest gala. No one stopped her. In the garden, Jin-soo cried, not loudly, the quiet, suffocated crying of a child who learned early that tears make adults uncomfortable. Tiana didn't speak. She held him. That was enough. Inside, Dong Hyun watched from the window, glass of whiskey in his hand. His face showed nothing, but the glass was shaking. Later that night, alone in her room, Tiana opened the note. 2 things inside. Coordinates to a location outside Seoul, and 5 words. Yuna didn't die by accident. Tiana didn't go to the coordinates. Not yet. She'd learned enough about the Park household to know moving too fast gets people buried alongside the secrets they uncover. For 2 weeks after the gala, Tiana played the role. Perfect caretaker, obedient staff. Dong Hyun said nothing about the night she walked his son off that stage. The silence was worse than confrontation. It meant he was watching. calculating. During the day, Tiana was invisible. At night, she worked. She sat with Mrs. Cho after the estate went dark, piecing together Yuna's final months. What she revealed broke the story wide open. Yuna didn't find the ledger by accident. Someone inside the family gave her access, someone who needed a witness clean enough to be believed if the truth ever surfaced. That someone was Director Kang. Kang, the man who recruited Tiana, who designed Jinsu's test, who stood at Dong Hyun's right hand every day while working against the empire for years. His loyalty was never to the parks, Mrs. Cho said quietly. After Yuna died, he was the one who insisted on finding a new caretaker for Jinsu. The pieces locked. Kang designed the test, chose the hospital, chose the city, chose Tiana. Not randomly, deliberately. He's been building something for a long time, Mrs. Cho whispered, and you are part of it. 3 days later, Tiana found Kang alone in the east courtyard, evening sky bruised purple and orange. She asked one question. Did you choose me because of who I am, or because of what you need me to do? He studied her, same unreadable expression from that Atlanta parking lot. Then he spoke, and everything Tiana thought she understood collapsed. Yuna chose you. Silence. Before she died, she made a list. People outside the family's reach who could protect Jinsu if she couldn't. Nurses, teachers, people whose compassion was documented, verified, tested by life, not by wealth. He paused. She found you through a volunteer program you did in Busan 2 summers ago. A Korean grandmother you treated wrote about you in a community newsletter. Yuna read it and said, "If anything happens to me, find this woman." Tiana sat down on the stone bench. The realization moved through her like cold water. She wasn't chosen by the Park Empire. She was chosen by a dead mother's love. Every event, the boy in the hospital, the convoy, the test, was Yuna's plan, executed by Kang after her death, carried forward by a woman Yuna never met, but somehow she knew she could trust. Kang let the silence hold. Then he delivered the final blow. Add emotions. Make the story interesting. Dong Yun is sending Jinsu to a military boarding academy in 3 months, a place built to strip away everything soft in a child and replace it with obedience. Tiana's jaw tightened. Yuna's plan was never just to protect him, it was to free him. Kang's voice dropped. And you are the only person left who can finish what she started. The courtyard went cold, wind through the trees, soul humming below. Somewhere beyond that bruised sky, a mother she'd never met had reached across death and placed her son's life into Tiana's hands. There was no walking away from that. There never had been. Tiana spent 3 months building something no one in the Park household expected. Not a legal case, an emotional one. She started with Jinsu. Every day, she taught him truths, that his mother loved him, that softness was courage, that he had the right to choose who he became. She told him stories about Atlanta, about Lorraine, about knowing your own worth when the world tries to strip it away. The boy who wouldn't speak in that hospital began to speak volumes. He drew pictures of his mother for the first time in 2 years. He laughed without looking over his shoulder. He told Tiana one afternoon, "You sound like Emma." She built alliances. Mrs. Cho provided access to estate systems. Kang provided schedules, records, patterns. And Madame Seo, who Tiana finally met at the coordinates, provided the one thing she lacked: external power. Madame Seo and Yuna had been childhood friends, separated when Yuna married into the Parks. She'd waited 2 years for someone brave enough to act. She offered protection and resources, not from kindness, but because weakening the Park empire strengthened her own. Tiana accepted with eyes open. Their interests aligned: protect Jinsu. The confrontation came 3 days before the academy enrollment. Tiana requested a meeting with Dong Yun. When she entered his office, she didn't sit. "I know about Yuna." His hand stopped mid-reach for his glass. His expression didn't shift, but his body went rigid. the stillness of a man hearing the one sentence he never expected inside his own walls. I know about the journal, the ledger, the academy, and what it's built to do. She held his gaze. And I know the woman you erased from every wall in this house loved that boy more than you've ever been capable of loving anything. Silence, pressing against the windows. Kang stood by the door, stone-faced. This was the moment he'd spent 2 years engineering. Dong-yun rose slowly. You are a nurse from Atlanta. You have no power here. Tiana didn't move. I have something you've spent your entire life trying to buy and never could. I have your son's trust. She let it land. And if you send him to that academy, the world will see exactly what kind of father you are. Yuna's journal, the household records, gala footage of a boy squeezing a stranger's hand because his own father terrifies him. Every platform. Everything. She stepped closer. Or you can do the one thing you've never done. Choose your son over your empire. The office went quiet. Portraits of Park patriarchs stared from the walls like judges waiting for a verdict. Dong-yun sat back down, slowly, and for the first time since Tiana had known him, the mask cracked. Not anger, not calculation, grief, rising through the fractures like something buried too long. He opened the drawer, pulled out the photograph of Yuna, stared at it the way a drowning man stares at shore. When he spoke, his voice sounded like a different man. She used to say the same thing, that one day I would have to choose. Tiana stood still, because she understood, in that moment, she wasn't just fighting a powerful man, she was reaching the broken one underneath. The academy enrollment was canceled that night. No announcement, no apology, just a phone call from Dong-yan's office at 11 p.m. and a name removed from a roster. What followed was not a transformation, it was a thawing. Dong-yan didn't become a different man overnight, but he began. He ate breakfast with Jinsu for the first time in a year, sat at the long table and listened while his son talked about a bird in the garden, didn't correct him, didn't check his phone, just listened. He walked into Yuna's sealed room one evening, stayed an hour. When he came out, his eyes were red and his hands were steady. Jinsu noticed first. Children always do. One morning he found his father already at the table, waiting. The boy stopped, looked at Tiana, looked at his father, then sat beside him, not across, beside. Dong-yun's hand trembled as he placed it on his son's shoulder. Awkward, unpracticed, but real. Tiana watched from the hallway and said nothing. Some moments don't need witnesses. They need space. Over the months that followed, she built what Yuna never got the chance to, a foundation in Yuna's name, funded by the parks but managed independently, providing scholarships and mental health resources for children in Korea and Atlanta. Mrs. Cho was appointed director. 22 years of silent loyalty finally given a voice. Madame Seo leveraged the shifting dynamics to strengthen her own family, but she ensured Jinsu was legally protected in ways no single person could undo. Chess player to the end, one who kept her word. Kang left quietly. Before he disappeared, he handed Tiana a photograph of Yuna holding baby Jinsu. On the back, in Yuna's handwriting, "Find someone who loves without conditions. That person will save him." 6 months later, Jinsu played in the garden. Not the supervised, permission-required version. He ran, chased butterflies, fell down and got back up without checking if anyone was watching. He laughed with his whole body, the way children are supposed to. Dong-yun watched from the window. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. That evening, Tiana called home. Lorraine picked up on the first ring. "Did you find what you were looking for over there?" Tiana thought for a long time. "I didn't find it. I built it." Now listen. This story started with a woman sharing half a sandwich with a scared boy she'd never met. She didn't do it for money or recognition. She did it because that's who she was. And because of that one act, one meal, one moment, one decision to sit on a cold floor beside a child the rest of the world walked past, a mother's dying wish was fulfilled, a boy was saved, an empire learned that power without love is just a prison with expensive walls. If this story moved something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, after everything you just witnessed, ask yourself why. Stories like this don't come around often. Subscribe now. The next one might change how you see the world. That night, Tiana opened Yuna's journal one last time. Turned to the final page. If you're reading this, it means he won. Please protect my son. She picked up a pen. Beneath Yuna's words, she wrote her answer. He didn't win, Yuna. You did. Your son is safe, your son is loved, and he knows exactly who his mother was. She carried the journal back to the East Wing, placed it on the bed, but this time she left the door open. The sealed room was no longer sealed. The hidden story was no longer hidden. Walking back, she passed the hallway of park patriarchs, hard faces, cold eyes. She stopped at the end where a new frame had been hung that morning. Yuna, smiling, the same smile Jinsu carried. Tiana looked at it, then whispered the words her mother gave her at that airport gate, the words that carried her across an ocean and into a world that tried to break her. I remembered who I am.